Okay, welcome and good evening. My name is Dr. Brian Henning, and I am a professor of philosophy and environmental studies here at Gonzaga University, where I also have the pleasure of directing the Gonzaga Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment, your host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Isn't this exciting? This event is now being recorded and live streamed, so if you wanted to catch it later, you can find it on our YouTube channel. Before we get too far, I wanted to recognize that we are on the ancestral lands of the Spokane tribal people, the people of the river. Gonzaga University only exists because we were welcomed to these lands many decades, more than a century ago. We've not necessarily always been the neighbors that we should be, and so we hope in our work to do a better job of honoring our obligations and our relationships to those people on whose lands we find ourselves. This is actually the 5th annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. We've been doing this for 5 years now, and it's hosted, as I said, by the Gonzaga Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment, and co-sponsored by the wonderful organizations that you see on the screen in front of you, some of whom are at the tables over here that you can connect with after the event, or find them online and join their email list. They do amazing work in the community, and I hope you look for opportunities to connect with them, support their work. So the Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum was created 5 years ago out of the belief that democracy works well and only if citizens are aware of candidates' views on the most important pressing issues of the day, and if they vote. We believe that climate change is an issue of vital importance that affects all of our community and the world. Contrary to how it's commonly presented, climate change is not primarily a partisan issue. According to regular studies by the Yale Program for Climate Change Communication, 70% of Americans describe themselves as either cautious, concerned, or alarmed. In this traditional presentation of what they call the Six Americas, you can see on the left-hand side, those 3 circles on the left add up to 70%. Whereas only 22% of Americans are doubtful or dismissive. There's, of course, a great diversity of views, but most people understand that the climate is changing and that it's impacting many of the most vulnerable people among us with increasingly frequent wildfire smoke, deadly heat waves. It's urgent that our candidates for local office share their views on what they would or would not support to address this challenge. So once again, we welcome you. Thank you for attending this 5th annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. So discussing something like climate change can generate strong feelings, so it's important to discuss our rules of engagement. If you've been at this event before, you'll remember that we do not allow booing or clapping or cheering or other sort of audible forms of engagement. So no booing, no clapping, no cheering. If a candidate says something you like, then you'll hold up a sheet of green paper. I'm told that we're running a little, we have more of you than we anticipated, which is a good problem to have, but at least the people on the first 2/3 of the audience have red and green sheets of paper. If you find yourself with those sheets of paper and you don't intend to use them, you might pass them back, so feel free to do that. But basically, the way you can engage and sort of have audience participation is to hold up either a green sheet if you like what is being said or agree with it, and hold up a red sheet if you don't find yourself agreeing with it. So then you can provide feedback to what's being said, but still allow for respectful forms of engagement. So let's practice. Hold up either a green sheet of approval or a red sheet of disapproval for the following question. Oh, you haven't asked the question yet. Too eager. Are you ready to hear from the candidates? All right. So we had some red. You're like, why are you here? Why are you Okay, good. So in terms of the format, we are going to follow the same format used in presidential debates, not other parts, not other aspects of presidential debates, but the format will be similar in the following way. Each candidate will be given an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes as an opening statement, saying whatever they'd like regarding climate change, or just to welcome the audience. And then we'll proceed to questions. The candidates will each have 2 minutes to respond to a question, and there'll be up to 1 minute for additional engagement at the discretion of one of the moderators. At the end of the forum, candidates will have 90 seconds for closing statements if they would like. So, 3-minute opening statements, 2-minute responses with an optional 1-minute redirect and 90-second closing statements. In keeping with our tradition, the forum will be moderated by 2 students with me. This year we have with us Sydney Ashby and Grace Fletcher. Audience, as we've not yet started the questions, let's for a moment suspend our rules of engagement against applause and join me in giving Sydney and Grace a warm welcome. Sydney is a Gonzaga sophomore studying both environmental science and political science with a minor in film studies. She grew up around the base of the White Tank Mountains in Arizona, where she quickly found her passion for the environment. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sydney. She's also our event and communication assistant, so a lot of these events only happen because of Sydney's skill. So thank you, Sydney. Our second student this evening is Grace Fletcher. Grace is a senior at Gonzaga majoring in environmental studies, with a minor in sustainable business and solidarity and social justice. She was raised just outside of Seattle, loves to hike and ski and cook and hang out with her dog, Charlie. I'm really excited to have Grace here, who's one of our climate literacy fellows who works with our colleague Carly Hohenbein in the Climate Literacy Project, engaging with young people around Spokane on climate education. Thanks so much for joining us, Grace. We're excited to have you both here. So the forum tonight is going to be divided into 2 segments. The first segment is going to focus on citywide elections for mayor and city council. For mayor, we have to select from as voters between Dr. Lisa Brown and Nadine Woodward. And for city council president, voters will choose between Kim Pleece and Betsy Wilkerson. After the primaries, we invited all of these finalists to attend this forum. Regrettably, Nadine Woodward, who is running for mayor, declined the invitation to share her views and join us tonight. We also contacted Kim Pleece, who's running for council president on multiple occasions over many weeks, but she did not respond one way or the other. So we'll leave it up to you to decide how to interpret that lack of response or willingness to attend to discuss climate change. However, we are very happy to have with us 2 candidates, Dr. Lisa Brown, who is running for mayor, and Betsy Wilkerson, who's running for city council president. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. I think you probably need to turn those on.
How's that sound check?
All right, so consider our rules of engagement on, and so if you'd like to engage, be sure to use your cards. Candidates, just to remind you of our format, Sydney or Grace will pose a question to you, and you'll have up to 2 minutes to respond. And at one of the moderators' discretion, there will be up to an additional minute to further facilitate discussion. Our timekeeper this evening is my colleague, Carly Hohenbein. Carly, would you stand up? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. Carly is going to be keeping time for us. She's going to hold up a sign that says 20 seconds remaining and a sign that says stop when time is up. So candidates, please do keep track of the time so everyone can have an equal chance to talk. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin with... I don't have water for the speakers. You're welcome to do what you would like. Okay, good start. Okay, let's begin by having opening statements of up to 3 minutes. Candidate Brown, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Dr. Henning, and it is great to be back on the Gonzaga campus, having taught here for 10 years and for this particular purpose. So I'm so impressed by the center and what it's been able to accomplish, and it's relatively brief time here. And to have students faculty, staff from Gonzaga, maybe other higher education institutions or high schools here, as well as community members is really gratifying for me, and to have such a great turnout is also very gratifying for me. I believe we'll get into a lot of the details of these issues in the questions that I know we're going to be asked here, but I am running for mayor with the theme that comes from a Ben Harper song that says, "A better way." And I truly believe that there is a better way for there to be leadership in the city of Spokane, and specifically in the mayor's office. And what I bring is a record of effective collaborative leadership. And it's really, I think, pulling people and organizations and resources together that can help us move forward. And in this time of political polarization and genuine concern, alarm about our future, the future of our planet, and the way that climate change is affecting our social and political relationships, it's really I'm deeply grateful for the fact that you're here, that you care, that you're hopeful enough to be participating, because cynicism is, in my opinion, one of our biggest enemies in the fight for social and economic justice and environmental justice in our community and our country and our planet. I've been involved in issues of the environment and the evolving understanding of what climate change means for our planet in a variety of ways. First, as a graduate student in economics, studying environmental economics, as a legislator, chairing our state's energy committee in the Senate when we were really just making some of our initial progress, and as the Commerce Director and the Energy Office that is part of the Commerce Department. As we talk this evening, I want to discuss with you priorities I have for plans that we can take to take action, the Sustainability Action Plan. Sorry, I did not time that opening statement very well, but I'm sure we'll get to those issues as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy Wilkerson.
Thank you everyone, and thank you to Gonzaga for having us. Could I just have a show of hands of the students who were in the room? Thank you. I'd like to know who's in the house. So students are in the house. I appreciate that. My name is Betsy Wilkerson. I am currently council member for District 2, position 2, but I am running to be city council president, which would cover the entire city. I'm excited about the opportunity to use the skills I have to lead Spokane into its next chapter. A common question I get from a lot of folks is, well, you're already a council member, why are you running for a council president? And I have to tell them, because leadership matters, and when there's a gap, leadership steps up. I have a long history, and we won't tell you how long, but a long one, of community service in Spokane, starting from back when my daughter was in Girl Scouts, going on to lead other organizations that have made a difference in our community. I have chaired the Women Helping Women Fund. I have served on the Novia Foundation. I served as an appointee for the governor's office on the Commission of Judicial Conduct for 16 years. No, I did not get a retirement with that. That was a volunteer opportunity, but it was great. I have also served with St. Luke's Advisory Board. I've served on the Housing Board. So I have had the opportunity where Spokane has been my classroom, and I've had the opportunity to engage with people. I'm excited. I'm a business owner, and I'm proud to say that Moore's Assisted Living is the oldest continuous Black business in Spokane since 1976, and we're super proud about that. So caring for people of disabilities, and really what we're caring for somebody's loved one. The opportunity to take Spokane in a new direction, to partner, to work with anyone is just critical. And what we're talking about tonight climate change and what's happening globally and what's happening locally, and how local government can play its part, because everybody has a part to play. What local government can do, and partnering with the administration, whoever sits in that seat, to go forward and make a difference in Spokane. So I look forward to your questions, and let's get this thing going.
All right, thank you so much, candidates, and well done, audience, for restraining yourself. That was excellent. So, Grace, would you feel free to ask the first question to candidate Wilkerson?
Hello, candidates. Thank you for joining us tonight. I would like to begin somewhat broadly. From your perspective, what is the most urgent climate issue for Spokane to address, and would you address it if elected? First to you, candidate Wilkerson. From your perspective, what is the most urgent climate issue for Spokane to address, and would you address it if you are elected? You have 2 minutes.
To me, greenhouse gases. That's something that we can impact immediately and play our part. A lot of that to me will be what the city can do right now is how we electrify our fleets, how we look at the buildings that we occupy, how we allocate funding to help retrofit older homes, because really they are the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases with those old appliances, and having the funding to do that. Also, another area is continued education. We think everybody knows about climate change, and what they know about is what they see on TV, which is not always correct, as we know. But if we continue to educate and work with our public school systems, my grandkids came home and they were talking about climate change, and they were talking about recycling. That's stuff I never talked about when I was in school. So I know we are making a difference. So again, what we could do with the city and what we could do as partners, and we could do that immediately, and we are doing that.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, now to you. From your perspective, what is the most urgent climate issue for Spokane to address, and would you address it if you are elected? You also have 2 minutes.
It's really hard to pick one, and so I'm going to try to wrap a couple into one. I'm just telling you in advance. I think we have an opportunity, and we, in fact, are required, so this is something we need to do and we have to do, to build our sustainability action plan into our new comprehensive land use plan that the city has to adopt. So build our climate goals into our land use plan and do it with an eye to environmental justice, with attention to the fact that about 1/3 of our households are economically insecure households. So leading on climate with environmental justice, I think, is a unique challenge, but it's one I believe that Spokane, Gonzaga, with its mission, that we can, in fact, take on. And in a way, we must, if we are to succeed politically, because we can't succeed politically if we don't bring everyone along. And it also, it just doesn't fit with our values if we only succeed in a way that leaves significant portions of the population disenfranchised or disproportionately impacted. And that means both racial justice, economically marginalized communities, and certainly tribal relations are an important piece of that, both government to government and our urban native population.
So if you could only achieve one thing and you had to pick, what would be the thing that you would put forward? You're like, we can only do one thing in this area, and we can achieve it.
That's fair, but I think it's integrating our climate goals into our land use planning, because if you look at what council does almost every week, they're talking about land use and transit and infrastructure and things that that have to fit into the comprehensive plan. And so for us to adopt a new comprehensive plan that doesn't have climate change at its very heart, I think would be a mistake.
Thank you, Candidate Brown.
Hello, candidates. My question concerns climate change and water usage.
On average, Spokane County residents consume between 200 and 300 gallons of water per day, putting our consumption near the top of communities in the U.S. Please outline the most important ways the City of Spokane could at once regulate and incentivize the conservation of water and thereby lessen the impacts to our groundwater and the surface waters like Spokane River and in our changing climate, So candidate Brown, first to you. Again, the question is, if elected mayor of Spokane, how would you help at once regulate and incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I do know that I believe the city has adopted a water-wise program that is still in a pilot phase. And so I would always start with the data. Is what's happening? Is it having an impact? I believe they're taking an educational approach to water conservation of households. So I would want to understand that piece in order to understand what we need to do moving forward to make it more successful. But also the city itself has to lead in any area in which we expect households to lead. So I'll admit to not knowing the data here, but I would need to understand, are we using reclaimed water for our public golf courses? What is our own water usage as a city? And have we taken advantage of all the opportunities to lead? And I will give some props to the previous administration, the Condon administration, for working through some tough issues of securing funding for our water sewer infrastructure projects to reduce the pollution going into the river. Our river and our aquifer are absolutely one of the strengths of our region, but also one of the keys to our future. And so, again, city has to lead and evaluate the current regulatory structure and the current incentive, disincentive structure and see what to do moving forward.
Thank you, candidate Brown. Now to you, candidate Wilkerson. If elected to serve as city council president, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
Well, we know saving our water is really important to everybody. We look at other states that are having water drought issues and is impacting their economic development going forward, and the cost of water will be going up. I will say that the city has done some things, and we do have a water-wise program, but Lisa's correct. We haven't done a lot in our own house. Example would be our parks department. A lot of our watering in our parks are on old systems, and they still have to be watered by hand. So as we go through our parks department and upgrade that watering system, that will be one thing that the city can do, and we can start doing that immediately to save water. How we utilize water in the rest of our facilities is something I don't believe, that I'm aware of, that we've ever had any type of analysis throughout the city and our various enterprises of really what our water use is. So we don't know what we don't know, and we really need to make that. So we are doing education. Water rates are going up. I am concerned about that because our low-income folks is just one thing on top of another, and usually they're not the ones that's really using the most water, but they're the ones that are most impacted, and we have to be aware of that. So my commitment would be to continue to look at what the city can do within its own house at our own water structures, and we have had great progress in our water utilities and how we are working together, but there's still work to go, and also really how we partner with the river and the aquifer in the role we lead in educating our community, because people look to us to lead. That's what you expect your government to do, is to educate and get out in front of these things. So start in-house, parks would be one. I'm not a golfer, but I know people love to golf, but they require a lot of water too. And we also have our Spokane Streetscapes program, where you could landscape your front yards or your yard with the most minimal water available, and that is something else that we could also support and make that more affordable for people who want to do that work.
Thank you, candidate Wilkerson. To avoid catastrophic warming, we must stop burning coal, oil, and gas. For our buildings, this means that we need to transition away from methane gas and toward electric alternatives such as heat pumps. Given that federal heat pump tax incentives do not cover the full cost of refitting homes, and that heat pumps are important not only for reducing winter heating emissions, but also for keeping people cool in heat waves, should Spokane offer incentives to make heat pump refits more affordable, especially for low and middle income residents? Candidate Wilkerson, first to you. If you are elected City Council President, would you support efforts to incentivize the transition to electric heat pumps for low and middle income residents? Why or why not? You have 2 minutes.
We are already looking at that program. We have a partnership with SNAPs to help retrofit older homes. So yes, it would be important that we help incentivize, because it would be a cost that some cannot bear, and we have to realize that. So going forward, if we're going to start with the most marginalized, who live in probably the most older homes that need the most improvements, who make the lowest amount of income, then that's where we have to start. And let's be realistic about that. We know on the other end, new development, that will be built into the cost of those homes. But currently, we have to incentivize for low and moderate income homeowners. And also, I would say, with landlords, because they own homes too, and people are living there. If we don't make it available for landlords, then we are not really being as effective as we could be. Yes, landlords are in the business of making money, but when it comes to our climate, there's always a cost. And for us to live in a healthier world, we have to be willing to pay that cost. And I think the city should look at partnering more and allocating more money. Also, there'll be state monies, there'll be federal monies. We need to look at how we can truly collaborate to get the most resources in our community and the surrounding areas, because gas just don't stop at Havana or Francis. We have to look at this truly as a whole regional approach.
To clarify, so you would support additional allocation of resources to provide incentives to install heat pumps in lower and middle income?
I would, yes. That was a yes.
Great.
Thank you, Candidate Wilkerson. Candidate Brown, if the council appropriated funds to incentivize transition to electric heat pumps and you were mayor, would you sign it? Why or why not? You also have 2 minutes.
Well, yes, I would sign it if the council passed it, but I guess I want to ask the question, is there another way for us to gain those resources? Because Spokane is already facing a very serious budget crisis. And as the details of this get more clear to people, I think you're going to see that we're going to have issues even maintaining our current levels of service and our current levels of employment. Unfortunately, administration has overspent the balanced budgets that were introduced each year, and that though the gap has been filled with one-time funds, our reserves are depleted. So to transition to, are there other ways, if the council can't come up with the funds within the existing city budget, I would say, can we, for example, partner with our utility, Avista, go to the UTC and talk about ways to build those kinds of incentives into the rate structure of the utility? I mean, frankly, somebody has to pay, and we've got to figure out ways to do that. And local governments have a mostly regressive tax structure. And so if we just raise our taxes or we raise our utility rates, that falls largely on the lowest income households that we are trying to actually prioritize as we go forward in mitigating climate change. And so I would look for other sources of funds, but if the council finds them and passes that, I would sign it.
Thank you, Candidate Brown.
Do I get a chance to respond? Is that okay.
For our next question, I'd like to elaborate on the discussion of the intersection of climate and housing. Like many cities of our size, sufficient affordable housing is a challenge. We also know that emissions caused by buildings is among the largest source of emissions in Spokane. Would you support a plan to use city funds to build sustainable, climate-friendly, low-income housing in Spokane? Candidate Brown, If elected, what specifically would you do to support the building of sustainable housing for low-income residents?
Well, I can tell you, I'm going for state funds and I'm going for federal funds, and there are state funds available. There is a housing trust fund. Our local governments have not taken full advantage of funds that could have been utilized to build affordable housing. And there are energy incentive funds as well. And having been the Director of Commerce with both the Energy Office and the Housing Division, I believe we actually could create some innovative partnerships with our nonprofit or for-profit private sector housing developers and go for energy efficient, affordable housing and utilize some of the funds that the city has already passed, the City Council passed under state legislative authority, something called House Bill 1590, which is 1/10 of a cent of sales tax you're already paying, and that's for affordable housing. This administration is proposing diverting that to the Trent shelter. That's a whole other story related to housing and shelter, but I oppose that. I want it to go to affordable housing, and I want it to match and in application for state funds for more affordable housing that is in fact energy efficient.
Thank you, Candidate Brown. Candidate Wilkerson, if elected, what specifically would you do to support the building of sustainable housing for low-income residents? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So, as Lisa has mentioned, we did pass councilmatically 1590 funds, and that's been in the last 2 years, and that money was specifically designated to affordable housing. We are already partnering with entities that do that work. We'll be meeting the new standard building codes. So we recognized before this really bubbled up through COVID that there was a need, and Spokane was the first community to actually implement this councilmatic tax across the state. Yes, the administration wants to take that money and put it towards, there we go, I thought my battery died, and put it towards the track shelter. I'm not a fan of that. But money has been dedicated. And I agree, there is federal money, there is state money, there is philanthropic dollars that we could tap into in other entities. I know tribals have funds also that we could bring to bear. I think the challenge has been for our community, we have not been a good collaborator in how to solve our own solutions. Sometimes we've been in our own worst enemy trying to do it alone. And as with housing and homelessness, housing is a regional issue too. When we look at the land along I-90, those houses were demolished to expand the freeway. They were never replaced. Housing issue, environmental justice. You look at the west end of Spokane, taken away, never replaced. So we are at a point now where we could build better, smarter, more environmentally friendly and sustainable for the future. And I think we could do it at a way that would be affordable and not be cost prohibitive for the number of Americans that need that.
A redirect to both of you, since you had a similar answer on seeking state and federal sources of funding, and there are a lot of them. My understanding is right now there is no dedicated office to apply for federal and state grants at the city level. So if we're going to go for those funds, would you support the creation of an office to pursue those funds?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I also did at Commerce. We had a government affairs, legislative affairs individual, but I both promoted her and pulled her into my cabinet so that we could, and expanded that to have a federal component as well as a state component, so that we could be taking full advantage, even as a state agency, of opportunities to make sure we could apply for and pull in the maximum amount of federal dollars to Washington State. There are federal dollars right now in the CHIPS and Science Act, and Senator Maria Cantwell was a champion of that. That is, you would say CHIPS, it's about bringing the chip industry reshored to the United States, but it also has lots of opportunities for clean energy development and for innovative technologies on the space of alternative fuels, hydrogen, and those are areas where, with our research universities, WSU, oh, sorry, I went over again. I get carried away on that
Same
topic.
question to candidate Wilkerson. Would you support the creation of an office that would be staffed to be able to pursue these opportunities at the federal and state levels?
Absolutely. In my other role as the president of the Association of Washington Cities, all 281 of them, was at a conference in DC last year, and we had presentations from the federal government there, and I saw my other counterpart cities that had designated grant writers, and they were bringing in the money. As we would say, they were bringing home the bacon for their community. I come back to Spokane, I'm talking to the administration, and it's like, no, there may be a grant writer here, there may be a grant writer there, but there was no coordinated effort. I'm already working with our budget director to look at putting that into the 2024 budget to stand up that department. With that, I believe it would really get us a lot further down the road. One good grant would pay for that person. And I'm talking about grants, not just housing, but we got infrastructure needs to go on, we got roads that there's funding for that. So really a holistic approach to partner throughout all city activities.
Thank you, candidates. Addressing the climate crisis at the scale and speed is daunting and will require considerable coordination across many different parts of government operations. Not only do we need to plan for resilience in the face of extreme heat and wildfire smoke, we also need to reduce our emissions. Candidate Wilkerson, if elected City Council President, would you support an ordinance and appropriate funds to create a cabinet-level city office to coordinate Spokane's climate and sustainability work? You have 2 minutes.
Currently, we do have a office, not an office, but in the council role, we do have a sustainability coordinator. She's in this room tonight. We stood that up. That got us to our sustainability action plan. So we have been committed to this work for more than 4 years now. We do have a plan. We're working on implementing the plan. We brought together industry leaders and community leaders to develop this plan as how to best move Spokane forward. We are now, the plan's been approved. We are in the action phase. So council has that. I would support the administration if they put something forward. But once again, the way our city is structured, unless they're on council side, I cannot direct staff. That's the way our government's set up. But council supports it already, and we already have a sustainability action initiative manager.
Just to redirect, as you were clarifying, since you can't direct city staff and we don't have someone on the administration side, I think the question is about if you were asked to fund a cabinet level position in the administration to do this work, would you support it? Would you appropriate the funds to do that work from the mayor's side, from the administration side?
I could support that. Of course, it's all about budget. What that would look like is we would lose our sustainability initiative manager, and that person would go over. But I could support that. But it really would be a funding issue, and the work is going on already, and it will continue to go on. It could just go on a lot faster at the cabinet level.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, if elected mayor, in your first 100 days, would you commit to creating a cabinet-level city office and appoint a director specifically tasked to coordinate Spokane's climate and sustainability work? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I would definitely commit to, after being elected, before being sworn in, creating a transition committee process in which one of the dedicated subgroups would be sustainability and climate action. And I would ask that group, and I would ask these groups here tonight and the center to be part of that, and to look at the sustainability action plan and make recommendations and prioritize recommendations for me. And if they have an economic cost, prioritize, because definitely one of the things that will improve when I'm mayor is the transparency of information and the ability of the council to go directly to department heads and be able to get information they need, and the transparency to the public of the information. So the exact place that should land, I think it probably should be cabinet level, but in the first 100 days, I'm not sure I could deliver on that. I might be starting with a budget that's in the red. So I just want to be clear that I will turn to this subcommittee for both recommendations, because the Sustainability Action Plan has lots of strategies and lots of A.1 and .2 and .3, and I've been trying to work through them, and I believe I need community input to prioritize them. And I'm going to ask for the community to also prioritize them in terms of feasibility in our budget, as well as environmental justice criteria, and tell me how they will, in fact, help advance the needs of the most historically marginalized communities in Spokane and the lowest income neighborhoods.
So arguably the ranking and the prioritization, is an important part of it, but this question I think is about whether or not you would staff on the administration side someone to lead the work. Are you saying you wouldn't necessarily need that because you would be doing that, or?
No, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't necessarily want to start by saying I'm taking this staff person from the council, or this paid position, and moving it onto the administration side. But I do want it to be a priority of the administration, but I anticipate a more collaborative relationship with the council. And so that's where the question of where the person is actually placed in the first 100 days, I'm not going to commit that I would just be adding that position. I will say that's partly because I have committed that I will add a tribal liaison that will report directly to me as one of the first things I would do as mayor.
So Brian, you have to give me at least 30 seconds.
Didn't I already do that?
No, you didn't. Clarification. So I agree with what Lisa's saying. What I would see is the Sustainability Action Plan would really have to be operationalized in every department. I believe it has to be in every department, because if you just have it as its own thing over here, then this department just feels like they're responsible. So it has to be operationalized. Every cabinet member needs to have a role in how that is implemented. Of course, there could be a person overhead of that, but it has to be in each department, and they need to look at the plan and see the role they play in going forward. That way, it's throughout our city government, and it's not something on the side. So that's what I support.
Thank you, candidates. As mentioned before, I'd like, if you would like, you can make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. And so since candidate Brown gave the opening statement first, candidate Wilkerson, feel free if you'd like to share any concluding thoughts. You have 90 seconds.
Take off a second. Betsy Wilkerson, again, longtime community member, love this city, love the work that I'm doing. But experience matters, representation matters. How we go forward with someone to lead will be critical. We are at a point where we need people who know what they're doing. I'm excited to do this work. I'm all about environmental justice. My community needs this probably just as much or more than others. So I'm willing to work with the work that has already been started and how I can support that going forward. This is a great opportunity. I'd be honored to have your vote for City Council President.
Thank you. I would also appreciate your support. It's lisabrownformayor.com if you want to learn more, or you want to send me feedback or ask me additional questions or give me more ideas. I got more ideas just tonight from the questions that were asked, so thank you very much. I started to think about, are we maximizing native grass in our parks, for example, and What about cross-laminated timber and the way to improve forest health as well as address our need for more affordable housing? I truly will look for win-win-wins, and I was inspired by people who worked to bring organized labor into energy efficiency projects for low-income households, reducing our carbon footprint as well as saving them on their energy bills. I think Spokane can do this. I think that we can look for those triple bottom lines. And as your mayor, it will be a priority of mine to do that. And frankly, we haven't been talking about it enough on the campaign trail because people are very concerned about the issues of public safety and the visible unhoused population. So thank you for this forum tonight, which is going to cause me to bring this into every debate going forward. So thank you.
Candidates, thank you so much. You know, this is a really busy time, and it's hard to run for office all the time, but at this moment in our history, it's especially hard. So I admire both these candidates and all the candidates running. So everyone, let's suspend our rules and thank them for being here tonight. You did a great job. We got it together. That was really great start. So our second segment tonight is on city council races. For those of you who are newer to Spokane politics or need a refresher, our city is divided into 3 different districts. Roughly east of Division and north of the river is District 1. And south of the river is District 2, and west of Division and north of the river is District 3, as a rough estimate. City Council's 4-year terms are staggered, so half of the 6-member council are up for election every 2 years. After the primaries, just as with the others, we invited all of the candidates for City Council. And we're excited that for the very first time in our 5-year history, we have every single candidate running for local office for City Council. When we launched this 5 years ago, we really wanted to get to a point where candidates felt like they needed to be here and to share their views. And it's a nonpartisan opportunity to say what you would and wouldn't support. And so I'm really excited that we have all of the candidates here with us today for City Council. So candidates, as I call your name, please join me at the stage, and audience, you may please welcome them with applause each time. I'm going to call them in district order and then alphabetically within district. So first, Michael Cathcart, candidate for District 1. Lindsay Shaw, District 1. Paul Dillon, candidate for District 2. Katie Randall Traylor, candidate for District 2. Kitty Klitsky, candidate for District 3. And Earl Moore, candidate for District 3. So candidates, reminder of our format, just as you saw in the first segment, Sydney and Grace or I will pose a question. You'll have up to 2 minutes to respond, and at any of the moderator's discretion, an additional 1 minute to facilitate further discussion. Our timekeeper, Carly, is still there in the front, and you'll see those 2 signs letting you know when you have 20 seconds and when to stop. So please do be attentive to keeping an eye on the timekeeper so everybody has an equal chance to speak. An audience, our rules of engagement are now re-engaged, so please use your red and green cards to indicate what you think, but please don't cheer, boo, clap, or otherwise make any noise. So let's begin with opening statements. We're just proceeding from right to left of up to 3 minutes. So each candidate, we'll start with candidate Cathcart. You have up to 3 minutes. Oh,
Testing? All right. Well, good afternoon or evening, I guess now it is, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Michael Cathcart, and I have the distinct honor of representing District 1, which covers Northeast and now after redistricting downtown Spokane. I'm running for re-election because I really do believe that the opportunities ahead of us far outweigh the challenges that we are currently enduring. And I think we have a lot of great opportunities. As a dad, I really want to see a safe community for my son. I want to see a place where he's free and safe from crime and also safe from environmental degradation. I think it's really important that we have a city, a community that we can be proud of, that is clean, and that addresses those issues. But I'm also very concerned about the economics of a lot of the issues that are before us. I'm concerned about the costs and the impacts on many of the constituents that I represent in Northeast Spokane who are much lower income and much more challenged day to day. These are working families who really need a lot of support and help and assurance. And so I want to make sure that the policies, the ideas that we consider as a city council, as a community, are ones that are not going to impose a lot more harm on those individuals. I think that that is really, really important for us. And so, you know, we're in competition quite a bit with our region, with our neighbors. And so the most that we can work regionally, collaboratively, together on a lot of these issues, the better it will be, because obviously economies of scale are pretty significant, but also in doing so, it helps with the competitive disadvantages that it might bring. And so the better that we are collaborating with our neighbors, be it Spokane Valley or frankly even Kootenai County, I think it's really important that we talk, we collaborate, and we find solutions that work for all of us. And so I'm just really glad to be here and look forward to some additional questions as we go along.
Thank you. Candidate Shaw, you have up to 3 minutes for your opening.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here. This is my neighborhood. Well, I mean, I don't live on Gonzaga's campus, but this is the Logan neighborhood. This is where I have called home for a long time and have a deep pride for. And really, this is the area that got me started in advocacy. Just coming home, riding my bike, and realizing there's all this garbage on the side of the trail and knowing that we could do better. So started with cleanups along the river. That's a huge undertaking, right? Thinking about our future. If nobody picks it up, who does? We are the stewards of this land. So that eventually turned me on to working at the Northeast Community Center, where I got to learn more about our community, how diverse our community is, how wonderful our community is. There's so much strength in our community in Northeast, but then there's also a ton of people struggling, and they're struggling with behavioral health. They're struggling with getting food into, especially fresh foods, into their bellies. And so I feel like I'm from Spokane. I'm super proud to be from Spokane, but Northeast and downtown, District 1 faces different issues, I think. Our issues are a little special and unique, and I have not seen our part of town be prioritized when it comes to city's leadership. So I just feel like I have to step up. We have to be a part of the change that we would like to see. With the Logan Neighborhood Council, I have helped advocate for murals over graffiti. It sounds like a little thing, but it really, when you're talking about people who are dealing with mental health and high stress, having a rainbow instead of gang symbols when you're crossing the street to get to your school that's low income, that makes a huge difference. So just because things have always existed a certain way doesn't mean we have to not challenge that, to think about it in a slightly skewed way to make it a little bit better. So that I also I advocated for the trail along Illinois, just having access for our residents to have activity in our lives without having to have a gym membership. A lot of Northeast residents are riding their bicycles not just for exercise, but for transportation to get to work. So when our gas prices over here are $5 a gallon, we need to prioritize, especially in Northeast, alternative transportation systems. And I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, candidate Shaw. Candidate Dillon, would you like to share an opening statement?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gonzaga, for hosting this. The center is amazing. It's doing fantastic work here in the community, and really appreciate the engagement and turnout here on an evening. It's really tremendous, and so is your work. My name is Paul Dillon, running for Spokane City Council District 2, which is the south side of Spokane. I'm running to better our response on public safety, housing, and homelessness, and protecting the environment. Since we launched on day one, that has really been a cornerstone and a priority for our campaign. I have a long history working on different policies. I was a legislative aide for John Snyder, and worked with Kitty Klitsky over here on the Complete Streets Ordinance, which made sure that our streets were maintained for all users, including bicycles, pedestrians, and transit. From there, I worked for Senator Andy Billig in the 3rd Legislative District, and a lot of legislation to clean up the Spokane River, put a lot more funding to our toxics and our waterways. And after that, I've been at Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington, North Idaho, overseeing our advocacy and policy there. I really, got my start, kind of the advocacy and organizing bug with environmental justice. And a friend and I, we started an environmental news site in Spokane called Down to Earth. He ended up becoming the first Spokane Riverkeeper who's here today, and really spreading awareness and education on climate change. I fundamentally believe that climate change is real, it's an existential threat, and we must do everything that we can to mitigate it. And that means passing bold policies, and that means that that's what we can do in the city. And I really, really want to be the person to move these policies forward for a greener Spokane. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Dillon. Candidate Traylor, you're welcome to share your opening statement if you like.
Thank you. My name is Katie Treelor. I was born and raised in Spokane. I received my undergrad and graduate degree from Gonzaga University, and so I'm so excited to be here because 20 years ago, I never thought that this was going to be the capacity that I was going to be coming back to Gonzaga with, but I'm excited to be here and to be talking about climate change and how we can make Spokane better and cleaner. A big shout out to Gonzaga. Looking at your sustainability efforts in the last 20 years is amazing. And as someone who works with, I'm going down down the rabbit hole. Anyway, born and raised here in Spokane. After I graduated from Gonzaga, I taught for our public schools for almost 10 years. And then I started a nonprofit called Bite to Go, which helps feed hungry kids when they're not in school. And recently I started my own business, which coaches individuals with ADHD and other neurodiverse diagnoses to help them overcome barriers presented by executive function deficits. I have 2 little boys, Charlie and Henry, who are 11 and 12, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about the next generation because we are constantly talking about the big things that we can do to mitigate climate change in our city, but really it starts with our kids. And when we have children with short attention spans and a need for immediate gratification, the idea that they can do something now and it will have effects 20 years from now, it's hard for adults to grapple with that, let alone children. And so that is where I think that is my passion, and that is where you will see me prioritize climate change in Spokane. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Treelor. My apologies for getting your name wrong. Candidate Klitsky, please, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I think the only reason I can contain my excitement is because I just got my flu shot, my COVID shot this morning. It's mellowing me out a little bit. But I am super excited to be here, partly because I've attended a lot of these, and it's just so amazing to see that in the 5th year, you get so many candidates showing up. I've seen a lot where people are just kind of sitting at the table answering questions by themselves like the previous candidates we just saw. So congratulations for being so awesome on that. I'm Katie Klitsky. I'm running for City Council in the 3rd District. And I want to tell you, if you want to look at my bio on my website, it's voteforkitty.com, but I want to tell you about 2008 and 2009. In 2008, I was working 3 jobs. I worked at the Lands Council, I worked at FutureWise, which is a statewide public interest group that works on land use and transportation issues in the state. And I worked for Senator Lisa Brown, running her last Senate Majority Leader campaign. And so 2008, do any of you remember that election? So that was the year that President Obama won. We had a Democratic majority in both chambers of Congress. We had a Democratic governor. We had a Democratic supermajority in the Washington State Legislature, and I was working for 2 organizations that prioritize climate change. So I thought we were going to solve climate change. 2009. 2009 comes along, and we at FutureWise worked up a piece of legislation called Local Solutions to Global Warming. And what that legislation was supposed to do was to add a greenhouse gas reduction goal and a VMT reduction goal to the Growth Management Act that would require cities and counties to address that issue in their comprehensive planning process. Brian, do you know when that passed?
In the spring.
Yes. So,
In
2023, that piece of legislation finally passed. So, hooray! I was very tickled to get a question about whether I support that piece of legislation in my 350.org questionnaire. That just really touched my heart. But there was a lot of frustration for me in 2009 when that legislation didn't pass, because I thought it was a slam dunk. So what I did was think, okay, I am the Eastern Washington person for FutureWise. What can I do to make a difference on this very urgent issue? Because I was in the alarmed category of that first slide you saw. So what I did was I worked to build a coalition and get funding to go full-time at FutureWise to work on an ordinance called Complete Streets. And what that does is every time we do a major road repair, we don't just do curb-to-curb car infrastructure. We add our necessary sidewalks. We add our crosswalks. We add our bike lanes, and I'm out of time. But local level is super important. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Candidate Klitsky. No posing questions to me. That's not fair. Candidate Moore, you have 3 minutes if you'd like to share.
Hi, thank you. I apologize for my voice. I survived COVID, and this is what happened. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I have not been back here actually since this was my mother's home parish. And as we drove in tonight, I looked over there, and that was where my mother's funeral was. It was beautiful. And that's the last time I was here. So here I am again. Spokane has been like family to me. My young son and I came here in 1978. I attended college, got my degree, acquired a job, and I worked for 33 years as a registered respiratory therapist at Deaconess Hospital. My son also went to college here at Eastern. He got his degree, and he has been teaching high school at North Central for over 20 years. So this is home to us. It grieved my heart to see the difficult changes and things that are happening in our city right now. That is why I decided to run for city council. It appears to me that our city has strayed off of the path that serves the best interests of the majority of all of you here tonight, the citizens of Spokane. I've noticed in recent years the divisive nature of party politics that has overshadowed the values of compassion and unity that we all hold so dear. Instead of fostering environments of empathy and like-mindedness, we now see surges of closed-mindedness and self-centeredness. And that bothered me. It is my desire to leave a lasting and positive impact on all of you here, on your families, on our businesses, and on our communities here in Spokane. Spokane does better, I believe, when we leave politics out of things. The success of our city extends well beyond the realm of partisan politics. And we only succeed, as I have heard earlier tonight, when we listen to the voice of the people, and that is you. I offer a solemn promise to the voters of Spokane to prioritize all crucial matters that affect our community while actively seeking innovative and nonpartisan approaches. I definitely am not seeking a career in politics, not at all. I'm here for this year, this time on our city council. I bring unwavering dedication to honor the values and address the concerns of the people throughout Spokane. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Moore. I think we're now ready to proceed to our first question. We'll rotate through each of the candidates so everybody will have a chance of going first. So Sydney, feel free to begin.
Hello, candidates. I'd like to start with a question discussed in our earlier segment regarding climate change and water use. On average, Spokane County residents consume a shocking 200 to 300 gallons of water per day, putting our consumption near the top of communities in the U.S. For reference, residents in Salt Lake City use less than half that amount daily, bringing less than 100 gallons per person per day, excuse me. Candidates, please outline the most important steps that the City of Spokane can undertake in order to lessen its water consumption footprint, reduce negative impacts to Spokane River flows, and make our Spokane River climate resilient into the next generation. Candidate Shaw, first to you. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question and for being here. I really think that, when Betsy sat down, she said, my grandkids were talking about recycling. Why are our kids not talking about conserving water? I think that if we could engage our youth at a very young age and instill it in them that it's very important to conserve our water, I think that's a great approach. They can also teach their parents and their grandparents. And similar to what they were saying earlier, our Parks Department often has their sprinklers on when we're not supposed to be watering our own yards. And so if we can just take a holistic approach to conserving our water as a city, teaching it in our schools, and also setting the example. And also, additionally, I got a postcard in the mail talking about ballot measure 1 today. I don't know if I've ever gotten a ballot or a postcard saying how much water we are using compared to like Salt Lake City. I think that that's a really great point that every household should hear about. I'm not saying everybody looks at it, but ballot measure 1, it just was pretty easy to read. If we have something easy to read sent to homes, just because our water is our most precious resource, I think that it's worth the investment.
Thank you. Candidate Dillon, now to you. Again, the question is, if elected to serve as Spokane County Commissioner, what measures would you support to lessen the county's water consumption footprint, reduce negative impacts to Spokane River flows, and make our Spokane River climate resilient into the next generation? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. The Spokane River is the crown jewel of Spokane. It is our lifeline. It's really important that we really pay close attention to our aquifer flows, and we've had droughts become more and more regular with climate change. We've seen some, I think, really important steps from the city, such as the WaterWise program, trying to water, outside of kind of the hottest hours during the day. But I think that there's a lot more that we can do with incentives for low-income users, especially making sure that they're not suffering a lot of the burden of some of the rate increases. Absolutely, we need to have a lot more education about where we are compared to other cities, and really understand that this is a finite resource. There was a billion-dollar Texas oil tycoon that said water is the new oil, and so in a lot of other cities, we started to see water rights really kind of the greedy corporate interests coming in to buy that the same way that we're seeing a lot of control around big oil, and that's a really scary future that we need to address. So there has to be some accountability measures built into that as well. But I think that this is something that, hopefully in the next year, we're going to be able to institute some new measures as well as part of the sustainability action plan.
Thank you, Candidate Dillon. Now to you, candidate Treloar. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
So like I said earlier, I'm always going to bring it back to the next generation. And in my work, executive function skills are organization, prioritization, goal-directed persistence, impulse control. And we all struggle with those. No matter whether you're neurodiverse or you're neurotypical, we all have to look at ways that we can elevate those skills. So when we're talking about something around water conservation or water regulation, one of the things I tell my clients, and I'm going to tell the city, is that we need to break it down into small, manageable pieces so that we don't feel overwhelmed. And so those kinds of things start with little things, and especially with talking with our kids, what are little things that they can do today where they're going to see the impact tomorrow? And it's at-home practices, whether it's turning off the sink when you're brushing your teeth or shortening your shower, or watching your parents talk about how you're going to water your lawn at better, at when it's not high heat or during the day. And so those are conversations that we need to be having in our house so that our youth can understand the impacts that their actions are having on our community.
Just to clarify, if you're on council, is there anything you'd support to regulate or incentivize water conservation from the perspective of a council member?
Yes, so I've been doing a lot of research on planting native grasses in our yards and looking for ways that we can, the Spokane scapes, so creating yards and areas around our house that require less water.
Thank you. Candidate Klitsky, if elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
I really think we need a comprehensive approach on this, so there's not just one clear answer. I love the Spokane Scape program and the WaterWise program. I think that those need to be expanded, and we need to continue to make that a trend and a thing in Spokane. There's a lot of ways to landscape your yard and still make it very attractive without wasting water. But we also, the point was already brought up that we need to make sure that the in-house operations are also reflective of our goals. They have not been. We really need to fix that situation. Not only are we having to water during the day because we need a person to physically go out and do it, we're spraying our ponderosa pine trees and ruining the bark where it hits the water. They're not meant to withstand that kind of stuff. But I did want to bring up 2 unique things that people haven't talked about, and that is, we need to really, kind of like what Paul was talking about with our water rights, we need to take charge of where we extend water service. The city of Spokane is the largest water right holder in the region, and when we take control of where we will extend water right services, we are not only containing sprawl, but we're containing water waste. Some of the subdivisions that we serve water to are basically 10-acre grass farms that is not legal or sustainable for some of the water systems that they're on. They're operating on permit exempt wells, and they're not even allowed to pump that much water. So containing sprawl is another way to protect our aquifer and save water. The other thing is kind of an idea that I just have. I have a home on the historic register, and we benefit from a tax abatement from repairing that home and keeping it within the historic register. What if we had a program like that where you xeriscape your lawn and you got some kind of water rate abatement or tax abatement? What if you got to put a little plaque on there and said you were on the xeriscape register or something and be proud of it like we do with the historic register?
Thank you, Candidate Klitsky. Candidate Moore, if elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. One of the things that I will say to you is, my mother was Native American, and having been raised Native, I learned early on respect for our planet. We always were taught to have deep reverence for nature, and that's water. I think one of the first things that we need to do is we need to educate not just our children, but ourselves on the importance. I'll bet there aren't very many people here. I grew up in a home where we were not allowed to have automatic washing machine because it took too much water. We were not allowed. I never had a dishwasher until I was probably 35 years old because we were not allowed to have dishwashers in our home. So I would say to you that I am a firm believer of that. I have been living it since I was a child. But I think the main thing is we need to educate. People need to know. We're talking about landscaping. You need to know your yard. I don't need to water my yard every day for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. I live on a sand hill. My grass is saturated in 20 minutes. Maybe twice a day, but not really. So I think education is the most important thing, and then being aware and being respectful of all of nature and our earth. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy Moore. Just since education is outside the purview of a council member, is there anything that you would support as a council member to regulate or incentivize water conservation?
I would, with lots of understanding and explanation of what we are doing and why. Education.
Thank you, Candidate Moore. Finally to you, Candidate Cathcart. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the question. I'm really blessed because we have a significant portion of the Spokane River that runs through District 1, and so it's a great amenity, but it's also one that has to be cared for very carefully. We obviously have places and folks who recreate on the river. We use it for a whole lot of different purposes, and so we want to protect it. And so I think this is an area where we can do a heck of a lot better than we've been doing. And I've said it in this forum, and I've said it in other places in the past, that I frankly disagree with the direction that the city has gone with the WaterWise. I don't think that that is actually effective, and we haven't seen measurable results. What I would like to see us do is adopt a program that incentivizes the reduction of water, and I propose a plan to do just that, which would be a reduction year over year in your water rates based on your year over year reduction in water usage. And I think that would be far more effective a tool, because folks love to use their wallet to help make decisions. And so let's benefit the folks who are struggling in our community, and at the same time improve water conservation, improve the environment, improve the outcomes. I think that that would be really, really important. Now, we can't just stop there. I think there's actually a second piece to that that we have frankly not talked about at all, and I think I'm the only council member who's really brought this up. Gamification. This is the future, and this is how we get our kids, to Katie's point, to really get interested in these things. Because when you can gamify the ability to improve environmental outcomes, suddenly a whole lot more people are very interested in participating in that. And so whether it's your family members challenging each other, whether it's households challenging each other, neighborhoods challenging each other, these are opportunities for us to reduce the use and do it in a way that's actually fun and interesting and incentivizing. And I just think the outcomes will be far greater. And so these are the plans that I would love to see us push forward and implement going forward as a city of Spokane.
Thank you, Candidate Cathcart. That's a really interesting idea. And focusing on the first one, just really quickly, if it's the case, and I'm not sure it is, but if it were the case that some of the wealthiest community members are using the most water, is there a good reason to believe that incentivization would be enough to curtail that water use when the incentive wouldn't probably be there for those community members?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the extended time because I think there's actually another part that I didn't get to, which is also reconsidering our rate structure. We actually have an opportunity, I believe, to change the rate structure in such a way that the lowest income folks in our community would be able to access free water to a certain point. And I think that that would be a really, really good thing for us to consider. It's something that our water department has brought up to council a few times, and hopefully is currently being analyzed for the rate setting that will come to us next year. But I think that would actually be the way that you would get to those folks.
Hello, candidates. Thank you again for being with us here tonight. My first question is about greenhouse gas emissions. Despite having made a commitment 5 years ago to reduce emissions 45% below 2016 levels by the year 2030, the latest assessment shows that the city of Spokane has made no measurable progress in reducing its emissions. What should the city do to meet its pledge to reduce emissions and put it on a path towards net neutral emissions? Candidate Dillon, first to you. If elected to Spokane City Council, what policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals? Please be specific. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I think it really is fully funding and enacting our sustainability action plan. This has been a great document. I want to shout out the City Sustainability Office that's here and the work that they're doing and making sure that there is funding committed to that. But secondly, too, and this again just ties back to everything, especially water usage and what we see is such a driving factor in our greenhouse gas emissions, and that is land use. And so really, again, making sure that we have those sustainability goals and using that framework in our comprehensive plan, which we are going to be reviewing and the new council is going to be reviewing here, and this points the way to the future. We want to make sure that we are growing, near our centers and corridors, dense developments, really trying to mitigate sprawl, which we see impact more drive times, again, water usage, and also more houses that are being built in wildfire zones, as we saw this summer. And so it really is important to look at these issues comprehensively.
Thank you, Candidate Dillon. Candidate Trelaw, same to you. If elected to Spokane City Council, what specific policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals? You also have 2 minutes.
I really want to look at infill building and centers and corridors. I support the Commercial Stabilization Rate Act, which allows commercial space to be utilized as residential space, and that will really help with infill, specifically downtown. And when we have that density, we support our centers and corridors, we allow, it's going to save our city money, it's going to create good local jobs, it'll enhance energy security and reduce pollution, all the while speeding up economic recovery.
Thank you. Candidate Klitsky, same question to you. If elected to Spokane City Council, what policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals? Please be specific.
Well, like Paul said, I think it is important to actually implement everything in the Sustainability Action Plan. So that's the first thing I would say. But I don't think I could be sitting here running for office, having worked for FutureWise, and not admit that this is why I ran. That bill passed that we talked about, where you address greenhouse gas emissions in your comprehensive plan. We have a 10-year comprehensive plan update due 2026, which would be right in the middle of my term. So we have time to work on it. We have time to integrate these policies that will result in meaningful vehicle miles traveled reduction, and also more mixed-use development and density within our urban core, which will reduce greenhouse gases in a number of ways, especially when we're talking about building more sustainable buildings. Councilmember Cathcart and I have served on multiple, I would say unsuccessful iterations of infill steering committees, where we have tried to come up with policies as a city to improve our infill situation here, and a lot of policies were really not allowed to be on the table for us. But this is a critical time, and I think we have decided as a city that we need this. So we need to revisit our tax structure and make sure that our property taxes and our development regulations are reflecting our goals as a community. We have a lot of barriers in the way we do that prevent us from building multifamily development and mixed use inside of our urban core. And so we need to get serious about that, and we need to use the revenue that we gain from that kind of restructuring of our tax system to put into a housing trust fund to build that kind of development that we need, and that will reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions from building inefficiency.
Just a clarification, Candidate Klitsky. So is the comprehensive planning is the purview of the Planning Commission, right? So help me understand, what is the role that a council member would play in doing that?
It's a little bit complex, but the council is the one that ultimately decides and adopts the comprehensive plan, and usually there is a council liaison present at a lot of those steering committees as well that advise the Planning Commission. And there's also, because comprehensive plan needs to be comprehensive, there's a regional approach that is our countywide planning policies. There's a growth management steering committee of elected officials that makes sure those plans complement each other and make sure that we are doing good planning on a regional level as well, and that is part of the comprehensive plan process. And city council members serve on that, if that wasn't clear, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Candidate Moore, same question to you. If elected to Spokane City Council, what policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals? Again, please be specific.
First off, I would like to say I think that the goals that we are setting are working. We are a country that has the lowest of any country in the world. I like the idea the new school buses are electric. I think that's a start. I also think that they could do this more with city vehicles. I'm not sure, I'm not a mechanic, but I think of our dumpsters who collect our garbage. Maybe that is an area where we could also go electric. I think, again, a lot of this will again be in the Sustainability Action Plan. And as it was stated earlier, it's going to take a village. It's going to take a lot of input, and not just from the council and not just from the administration, but also I am a great proponent of you, the citizens, being involved in these plans that are going to affect our city for the next 40 years. So I guess the main thing I would say is the electric school buses, I like the idea of the city going more electric, and involve the community in some of the ideas to sustain this. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Moore. Candidate Cathcart, same question to you. If elected to Spokane City Council, what policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And there's, I think, a lot of things that we can talk about. But first, I will just repeat, I really do think that at the individual level, the greatest reduction we're going to see is through gamification. And I think that partnering with Avista and creating something like that that helps our constituents to compare themselves and compete with each other will actually do a significant amount to help reduce at the individual level. At the city level, a couple of things. One, we have been working really hard the last couple of years on new housing opportunities for the city. And the Building Opportunities and Choices for All Act, which I was proud to champion, really I think is going to help to push more options, both for home ownership, but also walkability within our neighborhoods. Because the more we can get folks living inside these different areas, the more opportunities it creates for something else that I'm a huge advocate for, which is more neighborhood retail. And the more that we can do that and accommodate that, the more it will allow for folks to have that short distance to their work, have that short distance to that nearby amenity, to the near park, to whatever it might be. We want these walkable communities, walkable neighborhoods. One example of a really great area right now that's really burgeoning is downtown Hilliard. And a huge issue that we're actually seeing is with some of the rules and whatnot in place for historic preservation. So some of the old buildings there that we really want to preserve, we're really starting to implement regulations that make it almost so that they don't pencil. And what that will do is actually create a lot of harm to the environment. There's a studies show that somewhere around 8 bricks equals about a gallon of gas. And so when you think about replacing an old building with a new one, you are significantly impacting the environment. And so improving those processes, improving those regulations to ensure that we can redevelop some of these old buildings is a huge environmental improvement that we need to consider, especially for areas like downtown Hilliard, where we have so much history that we want to preserve. But really all across our community, we have so many of these options, and I'm really concerned that we're gonna see those get torn down.
Just a quick redirect on the gamification, which you brought up earlier as well. The city of Spokane has a system called Sustainable Spokane. Right now it's sustainablespokane.org, I believe is the website, which has a gamification aspect to it, so community members can figure out what their own climate footprint is, and they can commit to doing certain actions, but then they can also form teams, community groups, and gamify it and have a social media sort of aspect to it. But it hasn't, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily caught on yet, so it seems like the individual action isn't necessarily working yet. Would you support allocating resources to help that be successful so that people can use the tool to have that virtuous cycle start?
Absolutely, but I also wonder though, I don't believe that the data is, I think it's manually added. And so with that, I think there's a lot fewer people who are gonna participate. So we've gotta create a system where this is actually connected to your utility bill and it's automatically uploaded into it. And so I think if you can do that, and of course it'd be an opt-in and customers have to be proactively wanting to be a part of this. But to me, that's where the benefit would really come in. If the user has to manually input the data, one, they may get it wrong, and two, it just isn't quite as easy to use.
Thank you, candidate Cathcart. Finally, candidate Shaw. Would you support the adoption of climate pollution reduction goals and the development of plans to achieve them? You have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the same question. It was different. Will you repeat it?
Of course.
Read the one before, because I think I made a mistake on that.
Okay.
So.
If elected to Spokane City Council, what policies would you support to achieve our emission reduction goals?
Thank you. Well, I am definitely in support of the Sustainable Action Plan that Michael did vote against. I think that we're coming up on our 50-year anniversary of Expo 74, and that was for a greener planet, right? So we don't have time to think about how we can save money on this anymore. We're running out of time. Our children are running out of time. We need to enact this as soon as possible, and that also, I think we need to think about riding the bus. How can we ride our electric bus more often? How can we incentivize, encourage Gonzaga's basketball fans to park and ride in on the new city line? There's different ways that we can be inventive and building in where the infrastructure is already made. I mean, we're losing our trees rapidly. North Spokane, it's very sad to me, and they are lodgepole pines, I think, mostly, and I think nobody really wants to plant those in their own yard. Those trees were really important to our ecosystem. So just incentivizing, moving the development where we have the infrastructure, and just being creative.
Incentivizing it how? Do I get a response? No. But incentivize it how? Be more specific.
So I don't know. Maybe Gonzaga can advocate for their fans to park over at SCC and ride in, or maybe it could be over. It doesn't have a park and ride situation yet, but maybe we could build something that could be a park and ride situation somewhere along the line. Or when we were talking about the infill, where we're going to add a tax to people who build outside of who are building, right? Because we haven't added that tax for fire departments and whatnot. So maybe that tax could be a little less, or could be slighted if it's built right here where the infrastructure is, where people don't have to have a car, where they can walk to the grocery store, where all of those things are in place.
Thank you, candidates, which kind of helps segue into this next question. So I'd like to return to the question about thoughtfully planning for growth in our area. If elected to the Spokane City Council, would you focus on increasing the density of development in existing population centers, or look to encourage the development of new lands? Is it possible to conserve open spaces while also increasing in population size? If so, how exactly would you achieve this? What concrete plans would you advance? Candidate Treloar, first to you this time. If elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I think we can do both. We can really focus on centers and corridors and making Spokane more walkable. We have great neighborhoods like Perry and Garland and Hilliard, and people need access amenities near their home. For example, when I was when I was working with Bite to Go, we talked a lot about food deserts and how so many of these families didn't have access to the grocery store. They'd have to get on the bus and they'd have to go downtown, they'd have to change buses, come back up, go to the grocery store. These kinds of things were taking families hours as opposed to a half hour with somebody that has access to transportation. So centers and corridors is essential. I also support the Spokane, to speak to the green spaces, supporting the Spokane canopy, which city just got a big grant to plant trees in areas that are underdeveloped, which will help with reducing temperatures, reducing carbon dioxide, and increasing water quality. So I think we can do both density and green space.
Just to clarify, it wasn't so much green space, but whether you would recommend developing new areas on the margins of the city. So in other words, expand the size of the city in addition to density. So are you saying you would expand the size of the city and do density both?
I think we need to start with infill,
Okay.
and then we do need it is projected that Spokane's going to need 70,000 more homes in the next 20 years, so let's start with the area that we can, building density in Spokane, and then have conversations about a comprehensive plan that might expand outside the city limits.
Thank you. Candidate Klitsky, now to you. If elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
There is talk of doing an urban growth area expansion soon, and that will be part of the discussion of the comprehensive plan update. The city, county, and all the other jurisdictions are going to have to do what's called a land quantity analysis to plan for future development. One of the policies in the countywide planning policies that I oppose is we have a super high, this is a very complex issue, but I'll try to make it simple. There's a element to that planning called the market factor, and ours is at 25%. That just assumes that this developable land will not get developed for no other reason than we decided to put a 25% buffer in there. I oppose that. I don't think that we need to unjustly expand our urban growth area and outsize it just because we've come up with this arbitrary number that's higher than most other counties in the state. So that is one thing I would do to control the sprawl and stop the development of greenfields in our community. And the reason that's important is because when we do greenfield development, not only is it not sustainable, it ends up with a lot of water and transportation and greenhouse gas impacts. It is also expensive for the taxpayers that live in the city center, and our infrastructure doesn't get maintained as we're spreading infrastructure out into the outer areas of the city and the county. So that's why it's important for multiple reasons, not just climate change. Can we do infill development? Absolutely, yes, we can. I think we have a lot of opportunity for infill, and we have a lot of vacant land sitting there. And I think there are ways to adjust our tax structure and development regulations to make it so that 25% market factor is just ridiculous, because we will be incentivizing with our own policies and tax structure the development of the kind of land we need developed in our urban centers and corridors.
Thank you. Now to you, candidate Moore. If elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I think the neatest thing would be if we could find a balance. We need to have balance, and that's so hard to find. I believe by lifting restrictions and zoning regulations, our government can incentivize developers to opt for infill development. I think that's important, promoting upward growth. And one of the things that I think of when I speak of this is our city downtown. When COVID hit, so much shut down. There are office buildings now and places that are empty. Wouldn't it be something if we could take and build apartments in these, have them downtown? Another thing that this would do, I think it would decrease crime, because there would be people there. There would be lots more eyes on the city. I think it would decrease homelessness, because when I say this, I would say that let's have some low-income housing in there. Let's have incentives to help get people acceptable and affordable applicability to have homes. And if some of them are downtown, then they don't have to drive their cars. They can have that infrastructure of walking to work, riding buses. After saying all this, I am not against outward growth, but I think it needs to be done with planning and a lot of thought to what we're going to do with this. And it takes a lot of planning, but I think also, as I said in the beginning, it takes a lot of common sense, and we need to find balance for infill development and also for the urban sprawl. It's both. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Moore. Candidate Cathcart, if elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And real quick, I do want to go back real fast and address the Sustainability Action Plan. I had a couple of amendments to that would have got me to support it, and included an amendment to guarantee that we wouldn't artificially inflate the cost of housing. And that was a big one. I wasn't able to get that through. And another was that we would amend that plan to ensure that we would create a metric of environmental effectiveness so that we could actually identify what the CO2 benefit would be of each policy, what that cost would be, and we could work through those to actually implement them in a data-centered sort of way. Now, we are facing a housing crisis. There is zero doubt about that, and that is what has really motivated me to do all kinds of things to ensure that we have housing choice and affordability across our community. Again, from the Building Opportunities and Choices for All Act, which really increases the opportunity for housing, home ownership especially in our community, to ADUs, improving the incentives for where and how those get built, transit-oriented development, improving the effectiveness of where and how people live near our arterials and transit. And there's just a number of things. And a big one that I'm really excited about that I've got our planning director working on now is alleyway housing. I think this is going to be amazing because of the benefits to that. Not only are you putting more people in an area where it's more cost effective to serve them, but you're putting eyes on our alleys, which are some pretty dangerous areas that need a whole lot of love and support. And it will be a massive improvement to our community. We've seen some really big cities implementing this in other parts of this country as well as Canada. And I think that that would make a big improvement. And so I've been committed to pursuing more infill, but I think anybody who says that it's a either or, that you have to pick one or the other, I think they're wrong. I think we have to look at all the data and we have to make decisions that are going to actually address the housing challenge. And if our infill policies are not getting us there, then we have to consider expansion of the UGA.
Thank you. Candidate Shaw, if elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
First and foremost, you don't have to move to live in a better neighborhood. Just get involved with your neighborhood council. You can have an impact there. So who knows what the possibilities are there. We need a Fred Meyer or some kind of multi-store downtown. So residents who live downtown, because people live downtown, we can increase housing downtown. We used to have a Costco downtown. Anyway, if that was there, people could live there and, you know, I just think about Chonies. Where are you gonna go? Target? It just seems like you have to leave the city basically to buy Chonies. So how do we get those to be available downtown? I know it's a weird thing to talk about, sorry, but it's truth because we all need them. And I see all the development with all of the apartments up north, and I know that the housing is necessary, but we also need green spaces for those developments and for those houses. We need bike paths or pathways, ways for people to enjoy it, have their quality of life and their housing. So it's really, I think, about planning. How do we plan for those box stores and for walkability, because I think that that really is a solution to a lot of our issues.
Just to confirm, are you saying both, or are you saying just density?
I'm saying density first, and why not prioritize downtown? I've talked to some people who say that they're afraid to go downtown, and I think that it's really this narrative that's not really true to me or to my family, that downtown is a wonderful place to go, and that if we did acknowledge the people that were living down there in real houses, there's some beautiful apartments and condos downtown that are there, and I just think that if we made it easier for people to walk around and grab, their essentials, and maybe have their friends over. I just think that there's community downtown. I think it's everyone's community, and if we had a little bit easier ways to accommodating our essential needs, we could get that there. As well as plan for parks when we plan for building outside of our city with lots of apartments.
Thank you, Candidate Shaw. Finally, to you, Candidate Dillon. If elected, would you support greatly increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane grows? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Encouraging density. My wife and I are raising our 5-month-old daughter in the Perry district. We are just a walking distance away from a transit stop. And we need to really continue to look at different ways to incentivize a lot of mixed-use development. I was really excited to see council pass a new ordinance to look at our open surface parking lots. If you look at an aerial map of downtown, we have vast swaths that are just been open surface parking. And it's really funny when we talk about the future of the city and how we want to develop, a lot of that future development is also looking back. We had a robust trolley system in Spokane. You see the tracks in the neighborhood, and the city gathered around and watched them burn. They held a bonfire for the trolleys. It's a nightmare vision. But here we are talking about how to expand transit-oriented development. And I really think that we can do it. We definitely have a lot of federal and state funds to unlock, and I really, we didn't talk about the budget too much, but want to get that fully functioning grants team at the city so we can really look at how to connect this to a lot of our infill centers and corridors and transit-oriented development. With concerns around the UGA, look, in District 2, this is a huge issue with the Latah Valley. I used to live there. In certain neighborhoods, there's one way in, one way out. There's a fire station there that is a house. So we shouldn't be building in a fire zone without a fire station. I'm really excited about the tree funding. I'll just add as a little side note, that money came from the Inflation Reduction Act, with Catherine Morris Rogers voted against. So a reminder for that when she shows up at the ribbon cutting. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates.
It is my understanding that Spokane Emergency Management is an office of one. For a city with 230,000 people, this is surprising. Most cities of Spokane size employ several staff dedicated to emergency management, especially given the rising threats created by extreme heat and wildfire smoke. Candidate Klitsky, first to you. Would you support the expansion of Spokane Emergency Management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You have 2 minutes.
Yes. Is it working? Okay, it's working. Yes, I would support that. A while back, I was the president of the Spokane Regional Food Policy Council, and we were looking at a regional food plan, and we were trying to incorporate emergency management into that plan, and we started talking to some local experts on that issue, and we were so underwhelmed with the resources that we had and overwhelmed with the potential problems that we had, we decided not to include it in the plan because it would have changed the scope of our work and we just couldn't encompass that. So that's kind of how dire things are right now in Spokane with emergency management, and we have seen increasing emergencies with climate change. So we do know that we need to address that issue. I think we need to have a regional comprehensive approach to it and make sure that everyone's contributing, but I do also think that there's state and federal dollars to help us achieve that. So we should get a grant writer and go after those dollars and make that happen.
Thank you, Candidate Klitsky. Candidate Moore, now to you. Would you support the expansion of Spokane emergency management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, I would. I think it's important that as we are planning, we don't just plan for today. We need to plan for the future. And having seen the things that have been happening just in our community in the past year, I think it's very important that we have a collaborative type of organization that can work with one another. It can't just be one single. I think it's important that to incorporate with more people, as I have said before, including all of you here, and let the vision be what can we do as a community to continue to protect our city and our surrounding areas from the climate changes that are happening and causing a lot of the things that we have no control over. But let's be aware, and let's be educated, and let's be ready. I do support this.
Thank you. Candidate Cathcart, would you support the expansion of Spokane emergency management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You also have 2 minutes.
Yeah, at the City of Spokane, we have a great emergency management director, and she does a wonderful job. But I really don't think that this requires a full staff to coordinate this. Frankly, it's not rocket science. And I haven't understood why in 4 years we have not been able to get this right. You know, it's really easy. You just create a network of schools, churches, community centers, and you make sure that every neighborhood has 1 or 2 options for where people can go. Some of those might be a cost, some of those might be free. But we've allocated $250,000 to do this work, and so I know that we can make that happen. Just for whatever reason, it has not occurred, and I think it'd be very simple. TRAC, which is where we have established a lot of this service in the last year, is not an appropriate location for everybody in our community, and it's not set up for it. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that that would be our identified cooling or warming center, or smoke kind of retrieval center. And so we have to consider neighborhood access, how are people gonna get there, and how do we just make this something that people know what to expect and where to go? It shouldn't be a mystery. We hit a certain temperature, we hit a certain smoke threshold, and suddenly it's, oh, where do I go, what do I do? You should just know, it's the school in your neighborhood, that's the place, and you know that it's gonna be open. I don't think that this is a very challenging issue, but it's just one that we have never, for whatever reason, on the administrative side, been able to buckle down and just make a path that would make sense.
Thank you. Candidate Shaw, now to you. Would you support the expansion of Spokane emergency management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You have 2 minutes.
I'm going to echo Kitty on the grants. I definitely think that we have an opportunity to have a lot more money. I think that if maybe that director had a helper, that maybe that person could have new ideas, fresh ideas of how to get the word out. Working at the Northeast Community Center during the pandemic, I know that that was kind of a hub, but that's not always the solution. So I think that a lot of neighbors are coming to me asking me for resources. And I don't always have the answer either. So maybe it's something that could be on our city website of just, I think that there's better ways that we can do it than what's been previously done. Yes.
Thank you. Candidate Dillon, would you support the expansion of Spokane emergency management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. And part of the frustration response is that we have seen a larger consolidation of services, which has led to loss of some staffing and response times. When there were the fires this summer in the Latah area, I was texting my friends, calling them, making sure that they were okay, and they were finding out about what was happening from me. They were finding out about it on Twitter. There were Spokane police that had to drive door to door, knocking on people's homes, telling them, you got to get out of here, you got to evacuate. So we have had a massive kind of communication breakdown around this. And one thing that we've not really addressed tonight enough, and we've talked a lot about housing, and that is the impact on individuals experiencing homelessness. We had 20 deaths in 2021 in June when we were under that massive heat dome. And the city opened up the carousel as a cooling center. That is, it's absolutely unacceptable. There's so much more that we can do. There's the Regional Homeless Authority right now that is being proposed with different, Spokane County, City of Spokane, Spokane Valley, all our municipalities working together with providers. And there's a lot of potential here to come up with, I think, a really good plan. Part of that would be a housing navigation center to have more wraparound services, direct folks to cooling centers, and hopefully open up more opportunities to take care of those who are really most impacted during this time.
Thank you, Candidate Dillon. Finally, Candidate Treelor. Would you support the expansion of Spokane Emergency Management to include staff dedicated to helping plan and respond to extreme heat and wildfire smoke? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Spokane has certainly become a city of extremes, extreme weather, temperature, ice, snow, and we do need to make sure that our population, specifically our underserved or minority populations, know where to go in case of an emergency. The Martin Luther King Center in East Central just received a grant, and they are working to update their HVAC and roofing system so that they can be a shelter in case of emergencies. And I think that's great work, and I'm so excited for them, but it can't be done in isolation. We need to make sure that the program, the grant money that is going to the Martin Luther King Center is used wisely, and then we use that as a template for other programs or other organizations so that they can kind of follow their lead and do those same things.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready for our last segment with the closing statements. We'll start with you, Candidate Shaw, and move down the line. You have up to 90 seconds for your closing statement if you'd like to make one.
Well, thank you, Gonzaga. Thank you, Dr. Henning, for having me. I am delighted to be here, and all the energy around thinking about how to make our planet last a lot longer is really important, and it should be important to all of us. So we have to put our minds together, and now is the time for change. So I'm so excited with many of these people here and the people that we saw before us. District 1 has 61 miles of unpaved roads and a 17-year less life expectancy. Our district needs investment as soon as possible, and I think a lot of those are outcomes that are coming from people saying they made money off of us and left us, right? They made money off of us, left us. Brownfields, District 1 needs to be prioritized. Housing needs to be prioritized for low and middle income people, and we need to prioritize mental health and drug addiction help. So, to a healthier community. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, Gonzaga. Thank you for staying late with us, and thanks to all the candidates for being here. It's so awesome to see a robust discussion on climate change and full participation. I think it's a real testament to Gonzaga, the power of civic engagement, and really a strong democracy. And you can learn more about me on my website, votepauldillon.com. I have a little bit more on my issues and values there and discuss more specifically around the environment and what I'd like to see. I really do believe that there's nothing that we can't accomplish when we work together. I think that climate change too often has been politicized, and my campaign theme is running to put people over politics. And as your next council member, I'm really excited to get to work on this issue front and center. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. I am very excited to represent District 2 as a city council member. I'm the only candidate in my race that is running as an independent, and independent doesn't mean easy. It is actually very hard. It is making a promise to the city of Spokane to make decisions based on research, data, and community input. I promise, as a representative of Spokane, to prioritize homelessness, housing, and public safety. And I look forward to representing our city and our communities moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sticking it out till the end. Those of you who are still here, I really appreciate you. And like Paul said, I appreciate all the candidates for showing up. This has been a great discussion. And I appreciate the Climate Center for hosting this for 5 years. It's amazing. One thing that I did want to leave with you with is this is the most important thing you can be doing right now, really, is engaging in local policy and politics. If we're talking about climate change, cities are where most of our greenhouse gases come from. And so what we do in our cities, in our policies, really matters and has a ripple effect across the country. And one thing that some folks don't know about Spokane is when we lead with policy, a lot of times the rest of the state follows. We're kind of seen as a test market in the state. And then if Washington does things, it has a ripple effect across the state. So what we do here really, really matters, and we have some great opportunities coming up. With that comprehensive plan update, a lot of other regional transportation and land use policies will also be set during those times in the next 4 years. This is going to be a really important term, and I think it's really important that we elect people with passion and commitment to address these issues, and also with experience and people who understand how these processes work and how to get policies passed effectively. Thank you so much.
Well, I too thank you all, and I want to thank you, Sydney and Grace. You've done a great job tonight. Thank you. I would say, as your candidate for City Council, my number one goal is to create an environment of safety in our city and the surrounding areas. And I want that for everyone. I want it for adults. I would like for adults to be able to go downtown, have a nice dinner, walk out of the restaurant and not be afraid your car's gone or the windows are broken. I would like this for teenagers, that they can go down to the new One Stadium, which is beautiful, and enjoy themselves and not be afraid to walk out of there and have something happen to them. And most, I am concerned for our children in our parks. We have beautiful parks in this city. They have toys and things that the children can play on. What happened to me this past Sunday, I went to the park, and right in the parking lot in my neighborhood were 3 people shooting up drugs. It breaks my heart. That should not be that way. I want to change that. I believe in the potential of Spokane to be a safe, healthy, and a livable city for all citizens. And I believe that together we can accomplish that in our city. I can accomplish more, and that's why I say vote Earl Moore, and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for sticking it out. I know some folks had to leave early, but this really is just a wonderful opportunity to share our views and thoughts, and I would encourage you, my website's votecathcart.com. Feel free to give that a visit. All my contact details are there if you want to reach out with a question or thought or idea. I'm really blessed. I have had the opportunity to serve in this role now for about 4 years, and have really fought hard for smart investments, smart policies that benefit Northeast Spokane in particular. We're working right now on a number of really interesting and cool things that will be coming in short order, one of which is a community broadband program, which will be really cool as we pilot that here in Logan. Another is a sub-area plan happening in Hilliard and the Northeast Public Development Authority, where I'm the chair, to expand housing options and improve the situation for our commercial businesses. We are working all across the board, safe routes to schools and traffic calming and a whole number of things all across the neighborhoods. And now we have a lot more to do, don't get me wrong. We have a substantial amount to do. And I get one more term and 4 years to work at it. And with your support, I really look forward to doing that. I also really was a big advocate for, with former Councilmember Burke, for protected bike lanes, especially on Illinois. That was one of the worst streets in the entire city. Now it's one of the best, and of course we get some complaints about the speeding, which we need to improve. But we have a real protected bike lane, and we're working really hard right now to make sure that we can keep that clear all through the winter.
So let's suspend our rules of engagement and thank the candidates. Thank you. Good. As the candidates are leaving, it really is amazing right now. If you give me just a second to thank, go ahead, candidates. I wanted to make sure we give a good thanks to our moderators, Sydney and Grace. So I just wanted to share and remind you that Election Day is coming up. The ballots are arriving in your boxes soon, and it's not too late to register to vote if you haven't done so already. So please make sure that you've done that. I'd also like to mention that the Climate Center, if you don't already know, hosts a number of events every semester, so please consider registering for those events and attending. As you can see, our next event is just coming up in a few weeks on hydrogen with one of my colleagues from the mechanical engineering department. This event has only worked because people like you are willing to come and stay late, and I hope that you are better informed now than when you came in and are able to make a vote. So make sure that you take time to submit your ballot when it appears and consider what you learned tonight when you do so. Thanks so much. Safe travels. See you next time.